Hello, everybody. It's Max with Crypto Talk now. Could Quant become the richest company in the entire world in the future? And on top of that, how about this for size? You heard me say this before. Quant is basically the Microsoft of crypto. What's the connection? Do I have proof? Well, I do this time. So without further ado, let's jump into today's Quant coverage. And if anything, I'm going to start off with this. I'm going to go ahead and full screen it for you. And it's going to give you a few particular examples, to say the least, on why I am making this particular statement for Quant. Now, it says comparing the worlds, money and markets. And I loved what I saw here because, if anything, it gives you the perspective that you need to see as far as the visualization and how it works. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to break it down like this. As you can see here, that square black block basically represents $100 billion. And of course, on the right side, you're going to see context on each category, which can be, of course, found here. We're going to get down to the comparison specifically for the purposes of this video, the Quant and Bitcoin comparison. So for one, let's start off with silver. On the right, it shows, for instance, and of course, this is not exactly completely up to date, but it gives you a good representation of these comparisons. So silver, for instance, the value of all above ground silver stocks and so on, estimated by some at 1 billion, is 17 billion using a 17-ounce spot price. In regards to cryptocurrency, it says the world's fastest growing asset class is cryptocurrency, but even Bitcoin looks tiny in grand scheme of things when compared to other global markets. You're going to see it how it's compared to, for instance, with the likes of Quant. Now, in regards to the world's biggest companies, this example you're going to see here represents 807 billion. It's a lot much more than that, right? So Apple is the world's largest public company by capitalization, basically worth, like it says, 807 billion. It's actually in the trillions. Last I checked. The world's richest people, again, on this particular example, Elon Musk is at the top of this particular list. I realized that as of recently, there's another person that bypassed him by, a few $1 million. Wasn't even quite $1 billion, because of, for instance, what's happening recently with Twitter. But that's beside the point. It says, in aggregate, the world's richest people are worth a hefty, at the time, 1.9 trillion. And of course, you see Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and so on at the top of that list. In regards to the state of California, America's most populous state, also an economic powerhouse with a GDP of 2.9 trillion, is just that, the state of California, that eclipses economies of most countries, to say the least. And again, you see on the left side, the comparison of those particular blocks, right? That's the main thing I want you guys to see. For instance, Berkshire Hathaway, Microsoft, and so on. Of course, what you see with the people, the GDP of California, the Federal Reserve, right? 4.5 trillion as of, between 2008 and 2014. Again, represents a lot of these particular blocks, right? Now you have, for instance, with currency, you have coins and banknotes. The total value of all of the world's coins and banknotes is roughly 7.6 trillion. China, Eurozone, rest of the world, USA, right up there, right? Almost has more, not as quite as much, but almost as much as the whole Eurozone. And of course, you have Japan. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to scroll back up just in case I didn't mention it before. So, for instance, Bitcoin's in orange, Quant is in blue. See where Bitcoin is going. It goes down, and then, if anything, encompasses this particular block that you see for gold. And of course, there's always that comparison that people make, for instance, with Bitcoin and gold and so on. So, that's still a pretty impressive amount of, market cap that you basically see there and so on, right? For the purposes of this video. Nothing to bat an eye at. But again, we haven't covered everything, for instance, the likes of what you see of this blue line with the likes of what Quant covers. So, for instance, you have these stock markets, United States, UK, Japan, China, Euro area, the rest of the world, right? So global stocks. The market capitalization of all the world's stock markets is equal to 73 trillion. Global money supply. The total value of the world's easily accessible money is 36.8 trillion. Again, it's a lot more compared to when this was first made, but nonetheless, this includes the world's coins, banknotes, and checking deposits. You see where all those particular blocks are. The broad money, right? You probably heard this expression before. The total value of the world's money is 90.4 trillion. This includes coins, banknotes, money market accounts, as well as savings, checking, and time deposit. I'll go further down. The global debt. Now, I do want to mention this for a moment. So, for instance, you hear about, for instance, XRP basically taking on a percentage of the world's debt, and how that's going to dramatically increase the market cap of the overall crypto global market cap, right? It's going to be huge. So it says global debt. This is the total amount of debt, including the accumulated by governments, corporations, and households. Together, it adds 215, I should say, trillion, which is 325% of global GDP. Keep in mind, like I mentioned before, the United States of America's national debt is 31 trillion, and it's expected to go up to 41 trillion by 2026. 70 trillion of the world's debt, 33%, was added in the last decade alone. Of course, you see some of these other figures, right? And of course, I'm not going to read all of this, but if anything, look at this from a global real estate, commercial real estate, agricultural real estate. You see how it highlighted and so on. That in itself totals 217 trillion worldwide. We go further down. You see, for instance, residential real estate. Excuse me. Now, how about this? The derivative market. Sometimes this gets brought up, especially on various news outlets, especially like was it CNBC and Fox Business, stuff like that. So the derivative market says the low end estimate of the size and scope of global derivative markets is 544 trillion on a national contract basis. You wonder what a derivative is? A derivative is a contract between two or more parties that derives its value from the performance of an underlying asset, index, or entity. Examples of derivatives are futures contracts, forward contracts, options, warrants, and swaps. Now, in regards to banks specifically, because we do talk about banks quite a bit here at CTN, banks typically use high amounts of leverage to attain these positions. Some derivatives, such as commodity futures, are basically traded on regulated exchanges such as the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is the CME. However, the majority of derivatives are basically traded, outside of exchanges between private companies and are called over-the-counter trades. And of course, collateralized debt obligations and credit default swaps are two derivative types that are now infamous, of course, for the roles in just that, the 2008 financial crisis. Now, it says we have reached the low end estimate of 544 trillion. A high end estimate for the value of all derivative contracts is as high as 1.2 quadrillion. Truth is, no one really knows the exact size of the market, and nobody can really technically guess, for instance, the price of what XRP will be in the future, Quant, and so on. But for the purposes of this video, I want to give you some of these examples. Now, of course, there's other quotes on the right side here, and there's some great quotes, don't get me wrong, from some very famous people. But as we scroll down further more, notice the blue lines, left and right. Like it says, keep scrolling. And it says, yup, that's a lot with what we covered, right? So everything you see there from the top to the bottom and then to the left going back up, that's what Quant basically covers. Right? Bitcoin was in that orange. Again, that perspective. This is why I am making the statement of why I feel as though Quant will become the richest company in the entire world in the future. Now, let me back that up a little bit more. All right, so for one, let me give you guys what you were looking for. And that is this right here. So, for instance, it says Overledger is like Windows in the 90s. Right, and this is again Gilbert Verdian even presenting it himself. So you literally hearing it or seeing it from the man himself, the CEO of Quant. Overledger is like Windows in the 90s, right? And he gives you some of these particular examples. Literally, there you go. I'm not just stating it to state it. And of course, I had a special guest on the show. Shout out to Jeremy, the crypto realist. Great content creator. Great, gives great insight on various cryptos and so on. And when I mentioned, for instance, because he wasn't fully aware of Quant, and a lot of people aren't. But when I made the comparison, I said, Quant basically is like the Microsoft of crypto. He's just like, oh boy, that could be good and bad. Well, bad from the perspective, like he was mentioning, you don't want a blue screen death and stuff like that. I get that. But I look at good as far as some of these things I'm going to show to you guys. And that is, for instance, when I think of Quant in the Microsoft connection, I'm literally thinking about, for instance, Microsoft was and still is like a monopoly. And last I checked, monopolies make a lot of money, to say the least. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a little bit more in regards to this. So at the very bottom of that particular comparing and contrasting chart, if you will, we just showed you in regards to, Quant compared to Bitcoin. There was this, which was at the very bottom. I've gone ahead and blown this up. So, some of you guys know about this, some of you don't. And I've shown you guys, of course, quite a few different charts and whatnot. But, one of the key things I loved about Quant is, and I still love about Quant is, for instance, like here in the United States, we have a problem with inflation. So check this out. Very top, no inflation, no new tokens minted. Tiny total supply of 4.6 million Quant. Market cap of 41 million. Again, this is kind of old because let's face it, the market cap of Quant is not 41 million, 1.4 billion and growing. Quant is one of the very few tokens that is needed even for enterprises using permission blockchains. But of course, we know a lot about this, for instance. But one of the most appealing ones is this. 12 million Quant already in circulation, so no huge amounts of Quant to be released by the team, advisors, like other projects. Hence why I always mention, for instance, Quant is like the Bitcoin. It's basically, it's like the Bitcoin. What am I saying? It's basically Bitcoin with utility. All right. I know I said it many times, and of course I've taken some heat from the Bitcoin maxis apparently by making that particular statement. But if anything, my key takeaway is like Larry mentioned, Larry Crypto Talk Now, and that is he's the co-host, by the way, for a lot of you guys that just watch the Quant videos on our live show. By the way, check it out, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, every single day of the week. But he pointed out that he feels the Quant is better than Bitcoin. Well, of course, it's basically Bitcoin with utility. But again, kind of like what you see right here, Quant Treasury enables direct fiat on-ramp so enterprises can pay in fiat, which gets converted, of course, to the Quant via the Treasury. So the partnerships you have down here, we're talking about, for instance, Bitcoin. I mean, they do have a partnership with Bitcoin. By the way, they also have partnerships with ones that actually have utility, XRP, Stellar, so on and so forth, right? All right. So I showed you guys, of course, this, right? And, I'm sticking with that. Now, you may be wondering, all right, well, can you show me a little bit more? I am. So there's this. And, of course, maybe you guys use, for instance, Microsoft, or not Microsoft, but Encyclopedia Britannica, back when you were going to school years ago and so on. I remember I did, basically. I used it a lot, especially in the 7th and 8th grade, many years ago. So I like these particular write-ups, if you will, because if anything, it gives you an idea of where we were in the past and where we are now, especially going into the future. I want to show you guys this, because if anything, I want you to put emphasis on this key word, and that is innovation, and the Quant connection with that. So what you see here, for instance, it says that, for instance, most manufacturers of personal computers licensed by MS-DOS as their operating system, generating vast revenues for Microsoft. By the early 1990s, it had sold more than 100 million copies of the program and defeated rival operating systems such as CP/M, which it displaced in the early 1980s, and later IBM OS/2. Microsoft deepened its position in operating systems with Windows, a graphical user interface whose third version, released in 1990, gained a wide following. By 1993, Windows 3.0 and its subsequent versions were selling at a rate of 1 million copies per month. That's just insane. And nearly 90% of the world's PCs, listen to this, 90% of the world's PCs ran on a Microsoft operating system. In 1995, the company released Windows 95, but that was my first operating system, by the way, which for the first time fully integrated MS-DOS with Windows and effectively matched in ease of use of Apple's computer, the Mac OS. Microsoft became the leader in productivity software such as word processing and spreadsheet programs, outdistancing longtime rivals Lotus and, of course, WordPerfect in the process. Now think about this particular statement where it mentions specifically that, basically 90% right here, nearly 90% of the world's PCs ran on Microsoft operating system. The 10% basically probably went to the likes of, Apple's iOS, for instance, or OS X. I don't even know what it was called back then. But anyway, Apple's operating system, right? So technically speaking, from a consumer perspective, home PC perspective, Microsoft basically controlled 90% of that market. That is in itself what? A monopoly. Look at, for instance, Quant as we speak. Quant, to a sense, right? They can't really come out and say it, but you and I, for the most part, if you're really into the likes of Quant, to a sense, is kind of like a monopoly. And I'm okay with that. Last I checked, monopolies really make good money, to say the least. And, maybe some people don't like me, mentioning that. But, if you're wondering, the threat of that, again, look at, for instance, with Microsoft, there's a little bit more in regards to this. So, it says, as a result, by the mid-1990s, Microsoft became publicly owned corporation in 1986 and had become one of the most powerful, profitable companies in American history. It consistently earned profits of 25 cents on every sales dollar, an astonishing record. In the company's 1996 fiscal year, it topped $2 billion in net income for the first time, and its unbroken string of profits continued even during the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. Its net income had grown to more than $14 billion in the fiscal year. Now we understand, it goes on and on. But if anything, listen to this. When I talked about, for instance, the statement of, for instance, Quant and being a monopoly. Well, Microsoft, of course, went through this. So it says, for instance, Microsoft and its defenders counter that are from stifling competition and technical innovation. Its rise had encouraged both, and that its software had consistently become less expensive and more useful. The U.S. Justice Department investigation concluded in 1994 with a settlement in which Microsoft changed some sales practices that the government intended enabled the company to unfairly discourage OS customers from trying alternative programs. Following year, the U.S. Justice Department successfully challenged Microsoft's proposed purchase of Intuit Inc., then leading market maker of financial software for PCs. But again, it's above here actually where it says, the resentment and jealousy among rivals, some who complain the company's practice violated the U.S. laws against unfair competition. Again, the monopoly. My attitude is this. If Quant, for instance, becomes, or basically is, if Quant wants to get labeled as a monopoly, there could be another one that tries to, I guess, come and bring technology to the table. And if anything, with the beauty of blockchain technology and the beautiful thing about Quant, they might just say, you know what, let's be interoperable. How do we know that? You really see it with the older blockchains, right? The legacy system, the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, if you will, right? So I wouldn't doubt that they would just say, you know what, you're a competition, but let's work together. Let's be interoperable. We can all bring something to the table. And if anything, you already see that with some of these other ISO coins. Now, the other thing I want to show you guys is this in regards to Google. So again, I'm getting to the point of the ones that are innovative, to say the least, right? That's the main key takeaway that I want you guys to have from this. Sorry if I do the weird pauses once in a while. I'm still fighting this cold. So it says, for instance, by mid-1999, when Google received a $25 million round of venture capital funding, it was processing, listen to this, 500,000 queries per day. Activity began to explode in 2000 when Google became the client search engine for one of the web's most popular sites, Yahoo. Now, keep in mind, I was one of those type of people back in the late 90s in which I mainly just used Yahoo. And my friends were telling me, Max, you need to jump on the bandwagon. Go with Google. It's just a lot more. You'll see, it's a better search engine. And I thought to myself, I don't know. I mean, Yahoo seems fine, but then as time went by, I noticed certain things, right? So my searches were more broader. It was more of a broadened landscape of searches, if you will, right? You get a lot more, not just search results, but you would get a lot more quality search results. And then I found out little things that maybe you guys don't even do to this day. But for instance, you put in quotes in your search and it narrows it down even more. The point is this: Google were innovators at that time, right? Yahoo technically wasn't being too innovative, okay? And so with that said, like you see right here, by 2004, when Yahoo dispensed with Google services, users were searching on Google 200 million times a day. That growth only continued. By the end of 2011. Google was handing out some 3 billion searches per day. The company's name became ubiquitous, that it entered the lexicon as a verb. As the saying goes, to Google became a common expression for searching the internet. It didn't become, hey, Yahoo that. Nobody says that, right? Everybody says, hey, just Google this, or, Google it, noob. How about that? Anyway, so to accommodate this unprecedented mass of data, Google built 11 data centers around the world. Again, they kept up with the times. They expanded. Look what's going on with Quant. They're expanding more and more partnerships, more and more, connections, to say the least, right? It's not just stopping, like for instance, with that article, it said 59 partnerships, or for instance, or 59 banks. They didn't stop there. They're way much higher than that. Now, when I get further more into this, something else I want to point out is this thing with YouTube. So I'm going to show you guys that, for instance. I'm going to hop down, for instance, to that. So it says Google Video and YouTube. I'll give you guys a quick gist on this. You can see this for yourself. So, for instance, in January 2005, Google launched Google Video, which enabled individuals to search closed caption text from television broadcasts and so on. Problem was YouTube at the time. YouTube was still the big player. So as the saying goes, if you can't beat them, join them. In June of 2006, Google began offering premium content for free, but with ads. And of course, by I think it was the end of 2006, Google basically said, you know what, we can't beat YouTube. We're just going to buy them out. So they offered them $1.65 billion in stock, and as a result, they acquired them. By 2012, Google shut down Google Video and moved all the videos from there to, of course, YouTube over time. The point is this: recognizing, not just, if you can't beat them, join them. But think about this: the leap from Web 1 with the likes of Google to Web 2. For instance, with YouTube, they stood out. How? Because they were innovators, right? They implemented JavaScript into those particular videos. Heck, you guys are watching me either on your phone or you're on, desktop app, or the case be, maybe even on your TV. But think about this: if this would have been in the late 90s or early 2000s, that buffering, if you will, right? How long it would take to technically watch me. You either would have had to download the video, or you would have had to, pause it, let it buffer to like 15 minutes ahead, and then start watching it. Nobody has time for that. Excuse me. So the point is that jump, right, to what is called Web 2, right? This is happening during that time. You're having, for instance, JavaScript. JavaScript was a big player of Web 2. Now, again, you may be saying, well, Max, what's the Quant connection? The Quant connection is this, in closing. All right, I'm going to come back into the frame. And that is, I want to get involved, and I already am, with companies, if you will, that are the innovators, right? The ones that are building at scale that nobody else is doing. That's totally Quant. How's it Quant? Well, for many different reasons. But if anything, I'm looking at this. They are literally, like I mentioned in other videos, re-architecting the internet. Follow the money, if you will. I gave you some examples, for instance, with the likes of Microsoft, or the likes of Google. And what is the key thing, key takeaway? Those companies are some of the most richest companies in the entire world. The Quant is the architects, or re-architecting the internet, if you will, with what they bring to blockchain, and not just blockchain, right? For instance, payment APIs, literally everything, literally, right? Even Microsoft, we even use the term of Microsoft. Amazon Web Services, you name it. So if they're really connected to all this, I'm going to go with a statement of, they're not just this specific area, they're all areas. And where we're going in the future with expanding on Web3 is tremendous. Think about this. We talk about the metaverse, for instance. I covered the likes of XDC with MetaBlocks. By the way, check that out if you haven't done so already. But we live in an era that's totally different compared to the late 90s / early 2000s of malls. Just to give you a quick gist, if you're not even into the metaverse and so on, how about this? So for instance, with XDC's MetaBlocks, right, you go to a real world location, Paris, France, and on their particular server that's going to be hosting this particular metaverse, you have up to support up to 300,000 people for that particular city. Now, when they do other cities like New York and so on, then of course, those cities will have support up to 300,000 and so on. But my point is this. We live in a generation where people, for whatever reason, still some that want to go to physical malls, there's a lot of people who don't. Think about how innovative Amazon has become, right? They stand out as being the world's largest online retailer. The world's largest retailer is still Walmart for physical goods and so on, right? But as far as online retailers, definitely Amazon. They take the cake because they became so innovative over the year. They weren't just limited to being the world's largest bookstore, if you will, basically back in the early 2000s. Look at where they are at now. My point is this. If Quant is doing all these connections, right, like they have been and so on, and making things interoperable with the banks, you name it, it makes you wonder, doesn't it make sense that in the future, if you're re-architecting the internet and the adoption of the internet of where we're at now compared to where we're at the past, wouldn't it make sense that Quant would become the world's richest company in the future? Makes sense to me. So if anything, thanks for watching today's video on Quant. If you enjoy this type of coverage, like, comment, subscribe, and by all means hit that bell notification. And if you enjoy a live show where we talk about the likes of Quant and other ISOs, join us every day at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Thanks again for watching today's Quant coverage. And you all have a blessed day. And we'll see you on the next one.